In 1852, George Schneider opened the Bavarian Brewery Company in St. Louis, Missouri. 8 years later, on the brink of bankruptcy, Schneider had no choice but to sell it to a group of investors, including Eberhard Anheuser, a 54-year-old soap maker who had immigrated from Germany to America in 1842, and he gave it a new name, the Eberhard Anheuser and Company. Anheuser's daughter would marry another German immigrant, Adolphus Busch, and he became a salesman for the brewery. Even as the American Civil War broke out, the company was able to stay afloat, beer being one of the few alcoholic beverages the Union Army was allowed to drink. 4 years after the war's end, Busch bought his own stake in the company, and in 1879, the year before Eberhard Anheuser's death, the company was renamed Anheuser-Busch. The origins of Busch Gardens date back to 1906, back when Adolphus Busch bought a winter home in Pasadena, California, this having 36 acres and being very well landscaped. He called this Busch Gardens and opened it up to the public, becoming a tourist attraction even after his death in 1913. This lasted until 1937 and spawned the idea to open a new Busch Gardens alongside the new brewery in Tampa, Florida in 1959, this having an African theme. This led to another park alongside the Van Nuys Brewery in 1966, a short-lived Busch Gardens in Houston, Texas in 1971, and then they turned their sights to Colonial Williamsburg, planning a massive complex that included a new brewery, the Kings Mill Resort, and a brand new theme park. Themed to Europe and called the Old Country, this would combine beauty and thrills, staying true to its roots over the decades, and grow to be one of the finest theme parks in the entire world. This is part 1 of a 6-part documentary celebrating Busch Gardens Williamsburg's 50th anniversary. Join me as we take a deep dive into the last 5 decades of the world's most beautiful park. The origins of Anheuser-Busch's involvement in Williamsburg, Virginia dates back to the summer of 1969. This is when the nation's largest brewer opened talks with Colonial Williamsburg Incorporated, located in James City County, to bring a major development to the Kings Mill Plantation, this 2,500-acre site between US Highway 60 and the James River. This location was ideal for the 3 million gallons of water the plant would require every day. The target price tag for the project was $50 million, needing 1,000 workers to bring it to life, and it would bring in hundreds of thousands of people up front and millions later. 1 month later, the project was confirmed. It would take up 4,000 acres, including the Kings Mill Plantation and much more, including, of course, a brewery, plus an industrial park, residential community, recreational facilities, and a major tourist attraction, similar to the Busch Gardens Park in Tampa. Excited over the massive influx of cash into their community and the long-term boom this would mean for their economy, the James City County supervisors quickly rezoned the land to pave the way for this project. More than 800 business owners and civic leaders saw how this project would benefit them as well, welcoming Anheuser-Busch officials to the area. When this was announced, Anheuser-Busch said the Busch Gardens Park would not be ready for 5 or 6 years, but as the calendar rolled over to 1970, they moved their timeline up to 1973. The brewery expected to open 2 years prior in 1971. The so-called Virginia Busch Garden would not have a colonial theme, trying not to conflict with the Colonial Williamsburg area it sits in, trying to provide some diversification, and Vice President and General Manager August Busch III said they were considering 5 or 6 themes, hoping to decide on one by mid-year. Anheuser-Busch officials pointed to their park in Tampa, expecting 5 million visitors in 1970, and the gardens in Houston, Texas set to open next year and expecting 1 million per year, and they promised this park would be as large and as effective as the others. There was one big difference between this park and their other parks, and that was this park being more of a business, not so much a promotional tool. When it came to their gardens, Busch had a corporate philosophy: making friends is our business, hoping their patrons would come in free of charge and then leave the park and go buy their beer. But this was costing the company a lot of money. Americans had a lot more money to spend on recreation than before, and at this point, Anheuser-Busch was looking for ways to diversify their business, making leisure and entertainment a major part of it. Their new gardens in Virginia would not be free, nor would their parks in Tampa, Van Nuys, or Houston very soon. We believe that people will pay, and won't mind paying, for real value to see an attraction of quality, provided, of course, it is reasonably priced. Richard J. Bender, Anheuser-Busch Vice President of Corporate Affairs. Part of this decision was related to the brand new Disney World complex coming to Orlando the next year, the gardens in Tampa soon to have major competition, and the need to improve their product in order to stay relevant. In late April 1970, ground was officially broken for the new brewery, and in classic Anheuser-Busch style, it was done by 8 Clydesdales, turning a furrow to cut into the red clay. Construction crews worked through the end of 1970, trying to meet the goal of being officially online by the summer of 1971, but the project turned out to be 6 months behind schedule, wrapping up construction by the end of 1971, starting the 6 to 8 week brewing process, and the first Williamsburg-made beers being sent out in February 1972. This plant expected to produce 2 million cans every day. At the same time, the site of the gardens was settled on. It would be in a wooded site just to the east of the brewery, and it would not meet the 1973 opening date, or even the revised 1974 date, now targeting a 1975 opening after a 2-year construction period, hiring Sasaki, Dawson, and DeMay Associates Incorporated to develop the plan, having rejected another concept from a different planner. While this plan was in motion, Anheuser-Busch chose to pull the plug on the Asian-themed gardens they had just opened the year prior in Houston, Texas. It was unprofitable, and their efforts to improve it did not pay off. This raised questions about the Williamsburg project, but the company assured the public the project was on track and full speed ahead. Anheuser-Busch reassured those weary of their commitment to the gardens in the spring of 1973, announcing a $6.5 million expansion to the Tampa Park, including the creation of a Moroccan village, major thrill rides, including a log flume and a sky ride. Also, more entertainment, followed by an expansion of the Van Nuys Park, adding a 1901 country fair and a 6-minute monorail ride. In April 1973, construction began, $30 million being allocated for the 300-acre project. The next month, August Busch Jr. revealed the long-awaited details. The park would consist of 3 villages, England, France, and Germany, marking the origin of many early American settlers. The architecture of each village would reflect the park's official theme of America's pre-colonial heritage. The park would also have animals, including a bird circus and a 600-seat theater, in addition to the 1,000-seat Shakespeare's Globe Theater in the England section, one of 4 1,000-seat theaters in the park. France would have the French Trappers Village, displaying native North American wildlife, including the famous Clydesdales, as well as a 3 Musketeers theater, and Germany would have the Rhine River boat cruise, taking place on a 65-acre lake. Every section would feature live entertainment. In terms of thrill rides, there was to be a scrambler ride in England. France would have a Le Mans car ride with replicas of vintage cars, and Germany would have a bobsled coaster and a carousel. It would have 140 days of operation, open daily during the summer and weekends in the spring and fall, employing 500 people. The initial, all-inclusive admission price was projected to be $5. In September 1973, John B. Roberts was named the park's first general manager, coming over from the Houston Busch Bird Park, which had been shut down the year prior. He said the entrance fee would be underpriced in the family entertainment market, Anheuser-Busch still holding true to the motto, "Making friends is our business." That same philosophy that led them to offer free admission to the gardens in the past. We also don't plan or intend to get a full financial return on every square foot of the gardens. We're here for the future, and our plans and development of each garden is for long-term investment and return. He also stressed the importance of park atmosphere and authenticity. If there's a castle in the gardens, then there will be a castle on all 4 sides, not just the front. He also didn't want to copy other parks' layouts, stacking one exciting attraction after another. At Busch Gardens, we have designed our parks intentionally with areas of passiveness and then one attraction. He said the Williamsburg Park would have long winding paths into wooded land, and a train ride that's longer than necessary, connecting all 3 villages and giving people the chance to see all their animals in their natural environment. A name was also chosen for the park. It would be called Busch Gardens, the Old Country. Construction carried on into 1974. Personnel manager Tom Heilman noting the steep ravines and muddy conditions, saying the location of this park was a nightmare for their construction crews. In July, a sign popped up at the entrance of the park, noting there was only 260 days to finish the project, with the ominous but optimistic message, "You gotta believe." As the park took shape in 1974, one discovery made everyone stop in their tracks. A 200-year-old French saber was found buried under the soil, dating back to the American Revolution. People also took notice of the landscape during construction and how little land clearing was being done, maintaining the woods and topography around the buildings and footpaths. As John B. Roberts said, "During our season, you won't even be able to see France from England. It really enhances the feeling of being in another country and another historical era." They would also take a different approach to their parking lot. Instead of leveling one flat plot of asphalt, there would be multiple lots all around the property, situated around groves of trees, using transportation to shuttle guests to the park. This included 7 double-decker buses imported from England. By Halloween, the park was 3/4 complete and targeting a May 3rd opening. On Thanksgiving night, the Old Country would make its national television debut, 3 commercials airing on NBC during their airing of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Park officials said they were the only park outside of Disney to use network television to advertise, but in this case, it was necessary. While the Old Country was being built in Williamsburg, about 60 miles away in Richmond, Taft Broadcasting was busy building their second park, King's Dominion, and that was also set to debut on May 3rd. Tickets were set at $5.50 for ages 4 to 11 and $6.50 for ages 12 and up, and a family season pass went for $49. This included immediate family only, but it had no limit on the number of kids. Just before the new year, Busch Gardens started their search for 1,000 young workers to staff the park. As the grand opening date approached, park officials were getting nervous. The park's terrain did not handle the rainy season well, and construction trucks could not navigate the mud to finish the job. This only delayed its opening by a week, and on Saturday, May 10, 1975, the Old Country was open for business. Almost perfect is how John B. Roberts described opening day. Attendance was exactly what they expected, about 15,000 people, giving officials confidence they would meet their 1.4 million goal. There was no backup on Route 60 leading up to the park, as had been feared. The first family to set foot in the Old Country was greeted by the park's mascot, the Friendly Eagle, created from the Anheuser-Busch logo, and they were given a pass for the year. Every attraction was open except for Le Scoop Flume Ride, the log ride having some bugs that needed to be worked out and had not been tested for safety. The opening day attractions included Glissade, the park's one and only roller coaster, a Schwarzkopf jumbo jet with bobsled-style seating, Aeronaut Skyride and Blimp Debarcadere, taking riders 90 feet off the ground, Balmoral Castle and Die Hochbeneigen, a live steam train, Catapult Ride, a well-themed indoor scrambler, Le Mans, a vintage car ride, Kinder Carousel, featuring galloping horses and chariots, Grimm's Landing, where you board your 20-minute Rhine River cruise, and finally, Eagle One, a monorail that took patrons from the park to the Anheuser-Busch Hospitality Center. There were also dozens of shops, various shows, and the Wildlife Reserve, having more than 500 free-roaming animals. The only reports of long lines came from the Le Mans racetrack in France, as well as many of the food stands during peak lunchtime. Governor Mills Godwin called the Old Country another shining jewel in the crown that is Virginia. The Old Country kept gaining popularity, and even got to the point in early July where it had to shut down for 3 hours, turning people away between 1 and 4 p.m., trying to wait until enough people left to let more people in, this crowd causing a massive traffic jam on Route 60. At this point, attendance was 16% above what was projected. Out-of-towners were having problems finding a hotel within an hour of the park, and within 84 days, the park had its 1 millionth guest. In mid-August, the park had to close 5 times in 9 days because the 5,000 parking spots were all filled. By the end of summer, Busch officials called the park a raging success, almost too successful in some ways, the park having to scramble to add another outdoor theater seating 700. This in response to a popular bluegrass band in the New France section, hiring a new cast to perform extra shows in the Globe Theater, and John B. Roberts was already considered expanding the season into November and adding new villages into the park as soon as possible. However, when the park proposed an Oktoberfest expansion, the James City County Planning Commission rejected it, citing the need to resolve the traffic problems before the park got any bigger. They passed their preseason projection on Labor Day weekend and hit the 1.5 million mark in late October, finishing with 1,587,022. Not just that, but 2 out of every 3 tourist dollars in James City County was spent at Busch Gardens. Before the calendar rolled in 1976, Busch Gardens and the Highway Department engineers agreed to work on improvements to handle the traffic, splitting costs, enlarging the parking lot, and that was enough for the planning board to give the green light to Oktoberfest, and the park got to work. First thing first, they had to increase their number of workers, seeking 2,000 seasonal jobs, a 25% increase over 1975, projecting 1.7 million people to come through the gates. Crews worked all winter on Oktoberfest, and by late January 1976, it was clear their $11 million expansion would not be ready for the April 10th opening, citing bad weather, and stating adult admission would rise to $7.50 once Oktoberfest opened. This land would include 8 thrill rides. That included a new coaster called Die Wildkatze, a Schwarzkopf Wildcat, Das Katchen, an Alan Herschel Little Dipper, also a wave swing called Die Wirbelwind, a turbant called Der Blitzschneller, bumper cars called Die Autobahn, and an octopus ride called Die Schwarzspin, also a 2,000-seat festival hall, having beer of course, but selling it and not giving it away. This long-standing practice for Anheuser-Busch was carried on in the park's opening year, giving free samples of beer in the German Village, but that practice would end in 1976. The park would also be open on weekends in November. As the summer rolled on, the park actually cut their staff, citing an overestimation of tourism for the country's bicentennial. But once Oktoberfest opened in July, attendance exploded, even attracting 50,000 people over a single weekend in late August. Oktoberfest was so big, it increased the park's capacity by 35%. John B. Roberts hoping the expansion would be enough to handle the crowds for at least a few years. They surpassed their 1975 attendance number in late September, taking full advantage of their 21 extra days of operation, though they would drop their weekends in November after this year, citing cold weather keeping crowds away. In the end, the Old Country saw 1,825,423 people pass through their gates. Looking ahead to 1977, the park got rid of their two-tier pricing system, moving to one flat $8 charge for everyone over 3 years old, and we're selling advanced season passes for $25. After the massive expansion of 1976, the Old Country focused on revamping their shows for 1977. This included a French-style musical comedy called Le Music Hall, as well as Once Upon a Dragon, a puppet show from Bill Baird. Busch Gardens had committed $3 million in advertising for the year, including $500,000 on what they called destination markets, like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Later in the year, they would add musical acts to their list of shows, inviting country music stars Eddie Rabbitt and Larry Gatlin to perform 3 30-minute shows each day, and even got Tanya Tucker for a weekend, famous for her hit Delta Dawn, performing 3 shows a day in France's Three Musketeers Theater. All this was enough to keep attendance steady in 1977, but Busch Gardens was poised for something huge in 1978. Over the summer, news broke of a new $4 million thrill ride, something the park said would be unlike anything else anyone else has, and was described as the most awesome, most terrible thrill ride in the country. Thanks for watching episode 1 of the 6-part documentary. If you could drop a like and share this video with anyone who may be interested, I would really appreciate it. This is a massive project and I appreciate the support. I want to thank my Patreons. If you want bonus access, bonus content, and have your name listed at the end of each video, check my links below and join. Stay tuned next week for episode 2 as Loch Ness Monster leads the park into the 1980s.